Oh, it's all yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. And Anita, thank you so much for your kind words. So a little bit of background about who I am. I am the General Registrar and Director of Elections for Arlington County. I am appointed by a bipartisan electoral board, and I serve a 4-year term, and I am I'm nearing the end of my first term as general registrar. My appointment is up on June 30th of this year, actually. And I do hope to be reappointed. So I started with Arlington County in 2008. Just as a temporary seasonal employee. This is something that elections really relies on during presidential years. So if there is anybody interested in getting more involved next year, we will be hiring around 100 individuals to help support the elections for next year's presidential election. But I started as a temp and just gradually worked my way up in the office. I became an assistant registrar, then I became the election specialist. And then I was appointed deputy in 2012, where I served until I was appointed as a general registrar in 2019. I did work my first election all the way back in 2000 as a poll worker. So with that, I will go ahead and get started to talk a little bit about this election, some options for you to vote if you're interested in voting in this election, and then we'll dive into the meat of ranked choice voting. So I do have a presentation that I am going to put up. Okay.
Looks good.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm trying present. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is an introduction to this election, just some basics. What is ranked choice voting? What the ballot will look like, why we are using ranked choice voting, and some tabulation in the results. And then I do hope we'll have time for questions. But if you have any questions in the chat, just go ahead and stop me as we go along. So as I said, my name is Gretchen Reinemeyer. You might also see presentations over the next month or two by Tate Fall, our deputy director, our Tanya Griffin, our communications and outreach coordinator. If you hear something about an election from one of these three individuals, you should consider that a trusted source. We certainly know what we're talking about. And if you have any questions, I do encourage you just to call our office and reach out to us. And it can be anything about elections. So as you are aware, we are currently running the Democratic primary election. So this is the election to choose the Democratic Party's nominees for the ballot in November. The voter registration deadline is next Tuesday, and we do have same-day registration in Virginia now. So if you miss this deadline, you will be able to register and cast a provisional ballot after May 30th. If you do want to vote by mail this election, you have to have that application in by June 9th. But I would say put it in as soon as possible if you think you might be out of town or you just want to vote by mail. And if you do already have your mail ballot, it has to be postmarked on or before election day, which is June 20th. And we also, you can return it either via the mail, there's prepaid postage on that mail ballot, or you can use one of our drop boxes scattered throughout the county. So election day is June 20th. Polls, your neighborhood polling location will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And even though this is a Democratic primary, Virginia is what's called an open primary state, meaning that all registered voters in Arlington are eligible to participate in this election. We don't register by party in Virginia. Depending on where you live in Arlington, you might have a different ballot because we do have some Senate and House of Delegates races on the ballot. So we have 3 different ballot styles. Turnout will be around 25% or less, we're anticipating. Early voting is currently running. Virginia does still have 45 days of early voting. So before every election, our office here at Courthouse will be open for voting Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And the hours are extended in the week before the election. We will be open 2 Saturdays on the 10th and 17th of June. In addition, we have some evening hours on the 13th, 14th, 13th, and 15th. And we'll also open those additional locations starting on June 10th. We'll be at Madison Community Center and Walter Reed Community Center starting on June 10th.
Can I stop you right there, Gretchen?
Yeah, of
just
course.
because we want to reiterate this very important point we've already had a question on. So independent voters can vote in the primary?
Yeah, so once again, we don't register by party in Virginia. So any registered voter in Arlington is eligible to vote in the Democratic primary. Or if we were having a Republican primary, you could also vote in the Republican primary. So once again, the assumption is if you're voting in the Democratic primary, that you are interested in having Democratic candidates elected. So you will be put on the party's mailing list. We always, most likely, so we always like to, the party does think that you are a Democratic voter if you are voting in their primaries, but once again, it's open to any voter in Arlington. Okay. So we also have assistance at all voting locations. So we do offer curbside voting at every early voting location and at your neighborhood polling location on election day. What this is we will bring a ballot out to your car so you don't have to worry about trying to navigate or find the room where voting is taking place. We do ask that if you do want to vote curbside, it sometimes helps us if you can call our office ahead of time and let us know that you're heading to the polls so that we can go ahead and look you up, check you in, and have your ballot ready for you. But if you just show up at one of our locations, you should look for a yellow cone that has a phone number on it. It'll say curbside votings, and it'll have our office's phone number on it, where you can give us a call and let us know that you're waiting downstairs.
Gretchen, we've got a couple of questions.
Sure. Yeah.
You said if there was a Republican primary, a couple of people have asked, can you only vote in one of the two, or could you vote in both?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we are not having a Republican primary in Arlington. So the parties get to choose how they want to nominate their candidates, and none of the Republican districts in Arlington expressed interest in running a primary. So that is why we are not having a Republican primary. They will choose a party-run nomination event for their candidates. But if we were having a dual primary, voters would be asked to choose which primary they wanted to vote in. So you would only be able to vote in one primary. Once again, I'm not sure what the Republican Party is doing in terms of a nominating event or how they're nominating candidates, since they will be running that on their own. So, yeah.
We also have a question about requesting mail-in ballots. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to get online and put in one request and just say, I want a mail-in ballot for everything from now on, or do you have to do it election by election?
So that's a really good question. So in 2020, actually 2021, Virginia authorized what's known as a permanent absentee ballot list. So if you do want to vote by mail and you want to receive a mail ballot automatically for every election, you can go ahead and request to be put on that permanent absentee ballot list. Once again, because we are an open primary state, you will need to indicate your party preference for voting in a primary. And so you might be on that permanent absentee ballot list and you didn't get a ballot for this election. That usually means that you didn't request to receive a ballot for the Democratic primary. You can go online to the voter registration portal and request an absentee ballot. You will need to enter in a Virginia DMV ID number. So make sure that you have your driver's license ready for that to authorize that transaction online. We can always mail you an application, which you can fill out and return it back to us via the mail if you're more comfortable with using the mail process. So, okay. Any other questions from the chat?
No, I think that's it for now.
Excellent. So when you're voting in person, you can also request assistance to help fill out your ballot. So any voter who maybe can't see the ovals as well, or they're just more comfortable having somebody else mark their ballot for them, they can bring an assistant with them, or they can ask one of the election workers there to assist them marking their ballot. we will need to fill out this thing called a request for assistance form, where you'll need to authorize your assistant to help you fill out your ballot. So as I mentioned, we have 3 different ballots depending on where you live in Arlington. So you can see most of Arlington after redistricting is now in the 40th Senate District. So everybody who lives in a purple precinct or purple area will have the 40th Senate District, but they will not have a House district on their ballot. If you're in this teal color, this blue color, you are in the 40th Senate District and the 2nd House District. There is the 2nd House District race on the ballot, but a candidate in that 2nd House District race did just withdraw from the race yesterday. So notice will be posted on election day when you go vote. And then if you're in this orange area down here, you are in the 39th Senate District, and you are also in the 2nd District. So you would have that 2nd District race, but you're not going to have Senate District on the ballot. In addition to Senate and House District, everybody in Arlington is voting for the Commonwealth's Attorney, the Sheriff's Office, and the County Board race. So speaking of that County Board race, we are using a new voting method this year called ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is just a method where you, the voter, will be able to rank your candidate in order of preference, first, second, and third. What happened?
Can we pause here 1 second just to get clear on? That was really interesting about the effect of the redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
How confused have voters been about that?
No more than they are generally about who the representative is. Arlington, in terms of House districts, most of Arlington is in the 1st House District, and then South Arlington around Columbia Pike is in the 3rd House District as well.
Okay.
So,
those individual voters get notices that said you are now in a different district.
So they received a notice letting them know what the new district was. So not necessarily, and everybody got a notice last year. Once again, it was a sheet of paper that's pretty easy to get lost in the mail. And sometimes voters don't understand why they got it because the notice doesn't say you are receiving this because after redistricting, you have been placed in a new district. But everybody did receive notice last year, letting them know what district they were in.
How many voters were affected by redistricting in Arlington?
Well, 100%, because we used to be in 4 House districts and now we only have 3 House districts. And we used to have 3 Senate districts and now we have 2 Senate districts.
Okay.
So in that sense, we didn't change precinct lines, but everybody is in a new district. Sometimes your representative didn't change. But I know I live in Cherrydale and I was, my representative was Rip Sullivan, but now my representative is Patrick Hope. So there were some isolated changes like that. I'm afraid I don't know how broadly that was. Yeah.
Very good. Just wanted to spend a little extra time on that issue.
Yeah.
And then second issue before we get to the actual mechanics of ranked choice voting is, so I've also read about a lot of school board candidates. They've got yard signs up and there's stuff going on with them, but there are no school board candidates in this Democratic primary because
school board in Virginia is an independent, unaffiliated office. School board candidates cannot be nominated by a party. What Arlington Democrats do is they run an endorsement caucus where they are choosing which candidate they will endorse in the fall. But all school board candidates on the ballot in the fall in Virginia are independent candidates. You cannot run as a party for school board.
Thank you.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good question. Okay, so on to ranked choice voting. So when we say voters rank their first choice, we then do a series of tabulation and rounds. So let's say your first choice candidate does not get enough votes. We would then eliminate them and go look at your second choice candidate and move your ballot to count towards your second choice candidate. And we proceed through this process until we have 2 candidates that have achieved the threshold to win. I'll explain what that means in a minute. So in terms of your voter experience, this is very similar to every other way you voted in Arlington. So you will receive a ballot. This is a single sheet of paper that is double-sided. It's important only the county board race is using ranked choice voting. And so that will be on the back of the ballot with its own set of instructions. You will place your ballot into the scanner to be counted, just like you do with every other election. So the ballot looks something like this. We do have 6 candidates running for county board, and you will be able to rank your top 3 of those 6 candidates. And you just want to fill in one oval for each ranking. And it's also important, this is the year for the county board race in Arlington, where we will be, 2 candidates will win the nomination and move forward to that ballot in November. So even though you can only rank 1 in each column and you get to rank up to 3, 2 candidates will win this race, win the nomination.
Gretchen, why is it only 3 and not all 6 of the candidates?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That is a software limitation with our voting machines. Our voting machines were purchased in 2015, before ranked choice voting was ever introduced in Virginia. And so at the time, 3 rankings was sufficient. And in order to replace the voting machines, that is a pretty large capital expenditure. And so we decided to not upgrade the voting machines, and we'll just accept 3 rankings for this election. So it's important when you're marking your ballot that you rank a different candidate for each ranking. And that you only rank 1 candidate for each ranking. So the way tabulation works for ranked choice voting, if this is how you marked your ballot, if your first choice candidate is eliminated, we would then go look at your second choice. But if your second choice is the same as your first choice, then your ballot, we can't reallocate your ballot to go to a second choice since that candidate has already been eliminated. So this ballot would count as in that first round for candidate A, but if candidate A were eliminated, it could no longer be included in subsequent rounds of tabulation. So it's really important to know that voting for the same candidate 3 times does not increase that candidate's chance of winning. Also, you're only allowed to rank 1 candidate in each column. So even though this is an election where 2 candidates will win the nomination, you can only rank 1 in each column. And what happens here, this would be an overvoted ballot. And both of these scenarios, if you vote in person, will be rejected by the scanner, and you will get the opportunity to mark another ballot so that it can be counted the way you intend it to be counted. So let's do a quick quiz. I'm going to show you some examples of ballots. And my question for you is there a valid ranking on this ballot? So is there a ranking which would be counted? And how would that ranking be counted? So the first example I have is we can see this voter ranked candidate A as number 2 and candidate B as number 3. So is there a valid ranking on this ballot, and would it be counted? And you can either come off mute, and I can't see the chat, so.
No.
So it would be counted. That's because number 2 is a valid ranking. So even though they didn't rank a candidate for number 1, how we would count this ballot is we would look at that second ranking as their first choice. So when we went to tabulate it, election night, this ballot would be shown as an undervoted ballot. But when we got to tabulation, we can see there is a valid ranking for 2 and 3. So we would count this ballot as a vote for candidate A and candidate B. Okay, how about this? Is there a valid ranking on this ballot? Do you think this ballot would be counted or accepted?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is correct. So we can see this voter marked candidate B as their first choice, and they only liked candidate B. They didn't want to rank anyone as their second or third choice. that is allowed. You can absolutely do that, just like you can with any other race on the ballot. If you don't want to vote in that race or for a candidate, you do not have to. But what happens is if candidate B is eliminated, then this ballot is no longer included in any other rounds of tabulation. So how about this ballot? Will it be counted, or is there a valid ranking on the ballot?
Invalid?
So it's close. It is both valid and invalid, but column 1 for candidate B, that is a valid ranking. But the way this ballot would be tabulated is exactly the same as this ballot. So that we would accept a first choice ranking for candidate B, but once again, if candidate B is eliminated, we cannot transfer your ballot to support any other candidates in that election. How about this ballot? Valid or invalid ranking?
Invalid?
Invalid, no. Yes, very good. So this one, you cannot put 2 candidates in the same column. Once again, I know we're used to defining this election as a vote for 2. It's not a vote for 2. It's 2 candidates will win the nomination. Okay, so this would be rejected. So the reason that we're using ranked choice voting this election is it was first.
One more minute about the effect of those different permutations. My question was, if I only mark 1.
Yes.
And I mark it appropriately, does that mathematically improve that candidate's chance of winning?
No, it doesn't. All that it does is mean that your ballot will not be included in additional rounds of tabulation should your candidate be eliminated. And we'll get into what that looks like. So we have a tabulation exercise that we'll show you in a minute. Okay, so the reason we're using ranked choice voting this election is ranked choice voting was first authorized by the General Assembly in 2020, and it is authorized for localities to use in only the local city or county council races. In order to use it in a local race, the local governing body, which in our case is the Arlington County Board, needed to adopt or approve this voting method. So the Arlington County Board adopted use of ranked choice voting in their December meeting last year. And it's important to note that the county board only authorized it for use in this primary election. It has not been authorized for use in the general election, and it has not been authorized for use in primary elections in future years. I do believe the county board is interested in feedback to see how this election goes and see how Arlingtonians feel about ranked choice voting, to see if we do want to continue it as a voting method and whether we want to use it in primaries and generals or just primary elections. So they will be actively seeking feedback. So if you have feelings about ranked choice voting, I would encourage you to reach out to the county board and let them know how you feel about ranked choice voting. So now let's get into the meat of how ranked choice voting is tabulated. And if this is your first time hearing about how ranked choice voting is tabulated, it can be a little confusing, but I think it's really important for us to explain how your ballot is going to be counted, so that we can make the most informed choices when we go to mark our ballots.
I think, Gretchen, we've got 2 questions that might fit in here. Let's go back again. If 2 candidates will be chosen,
yes,
how do we indicate our top 2 choices?
So we are going to have to show one as number 1 and one as number 2.
Okay.
So you need to rank them so you'd have this in 1 and 2, but they cannot be in the same column. So you're going to have your first choice candidate and your second choice candidate.
Okay. Second question, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
How to mark the ballot, just to confirm, if you incorrectly mark choices, the first place entry is still counted, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as there's 1 oval filled out in that first choice, or we can determine your intention, we would be able to accept that ballot.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay. So this would be a properly marked ballot. You can see they voted 1, 2, 3. So, okay. So Ranked choice voting, the way we traditionally elect winners in Arlington County is that the candidates with the most votes wins. That's called a plurality election. With ranked choice voting, it's a way to achieve, it's not necessarily majority support, because we're not looking for 50% to win this election. That amount that a candidate needs to get does change by how many seats are being elected in that office. So as I mentioned, this is a vote for 2 year. 2 seats will win this year. So a candidate needs to win 34% of the vote in order to be declared the winner for this election. So this is a formula that was set forward in administrative code passed by the State Board of Elections. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to look at the number of votes cast, and we divide that by the number of seats to be filled plus 1, and then we add 1. So if we look at this, so if we only were electing 1 seat, this is where that 50% comes in, because we'd be electing the number of ballots cast by 50. So somebody needs to just go over that 50% threshold in order to be declared the winner. So this is, like I said, a way to get the candidate with the broadest support to ultimately be declared the winner. So when we go to count votes this election, the first thing we're going to do is establish the threshold. So we need to know how many votes were cast this election. We then look at all of the first ranked choice rankings on the ballots. And if no candidate has reached the threshold, we will eliminate the candidate who has received the lowest number of votes, look at the second choice for only those ballots from that eliminated candidate, and transfer those ballots to their next ranked candidates. And then we go through the rounds again to see if somebody reached the threshold. So because this is a vote for 2, if a candidate exceeds the threshold, they're declared the winner. We will then apply something called a fraction to all of the ballots that winning candidate got to look at the second choice candidate for those ballots if a candidate wins. Once again, this probably doesn't make sense, so I'm just going to keep going and show you an example of what this looks like in real life. So we're going to do a demo election today where we're going to tabulate Arlington's favorite ice cream flavor. So our 6 candidates running today are vanilla, pistachio, chocolate, cookies and cream, vegan matcha, and Rocky Road. So the important thing to know as a voter, when I give you these 6 candidates for Arlington's favorite ice cream, is can you as a voter rank your top choice ice cream from this list of 6? Can you rank your top 3? And that is your experience as the voter. And I really want to keep that in mind when we start explaining tabulation. So in our hypothetical election today, we had 20 voters cast ballots in this election, and we're going to choose our top 2 favorite ice creams. So to calculate the threshold, the number of votes that an ice cream needs to get in order to be declared a favorite ice cream, we're going to take the number of ballots cast, which is 20, take the number of seats to be filled plus 1, so that's 3, and then we add 1. So that gives us 7 and change. The good news is that we don't have to worry about anything that happens after the decimal place. So 7 is our magic number, and ice cream needs to hit 7 in order to be declared the winner. So in our first round of voting, you can see vanilla has 5 votes, pistachio got 3 votes, chocolate got 3 votes, cookies and cream got 3 votes, vegan matcha got 4 votes, and Rocky Road got 2. Once again, that threshold is 7. Did any ice creams hit 7 votes?
No.
So what we're going to do is look at Rocky Road down here with their 2 votes. So we're going to look at the ballots that were cast for Rocky Road. And as you can see, this Rocky Road on the left, their next choice was for chocolate. And this Rocky Road on the right, their next choice was for pistachio. So we're going to transfer these Rocky Road ballots to their next choice. So in the second round of tabulation, you can see pistachio has picked up a Rocky Road voter and chocolate has picked up a Rocky Road voter. Once again, none of our ice creams have hit the threshold of 7. So we're going to keep going on to the next round of tabulation, and we'll look at cookies and cream, which only has 3 voters. So once we reallocate cookies and cream, looking at their next choice on their ballot, pistachio has picked up another voter, and vegan matcha has picked up 2 voters from cookies and cream. Once again, vegan matcha is at 6 now, but they're not at the threshold of 7. And vanilla is still sitting over here at 5. So the next ice cream to be eliminated is chocolate because it has the lowest number of votes at 4. So we're once again look at the next choice on each of these ballots to transfer it. So you can see pistachio picked up a chocolate, vanilla picked up the Rocky Road. So this ballot over here for vanilla went from Rocky Road to chocolate over to vanilla. And you can see vegan matcha has picked up 2 chocolates. So vegan matcha is now at 8. They have exceeded the threshold, so vegan matcha is the winner. So what we want to do is, now that vegan matcha has been declared a winner, we're going to reallocate vegan matcha's ballots to the next choice on those ballots. But it's not going to be a full vote. We need to calculate how much extra vote did vegan matcha get to apply that to the next choice. So the way we do this, once again, it's a formula set forward in the Administrative Code of Virginia. We take the candidate's total number of votes and we subtract the threshold and divide that by the candidate's total number of votes. So essentially, and that is 1/8. So each one of these vegan matcha ballots, when we look at the next choice, that is going to go over to that next choice for 1/8 of a vote. So it's going to take 8 votes to equal a full vote for another ice cream. So, so 4 of the vegan matcha ballots looked like this one on their right, where their next choice vote was for pistachio. So 4 of our vegan matcha ballots are going to transfer to pistachio. 4 of our vegan matcha ballots no longer have a valid or an active candidate still in the race. So you can see this is a chocolate ballot that went to vegan matcha, and their next choice is for Rocky Road. Rocky Road's already been eliminated, so this ballot cannot be transferred to that candidate. So this would become what's called an inactive ballot. So 4 of our vegan matcha ballots are going to become inactive, and 4 of them are going to be transferred to pistachio. I know somebody on here is really good at math. So if we have 4/8 going to pistachio, what is that? It's a half.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what this looks like in the next round of tabulation after we apply the surplus votes from vegan matcha is, once again, vanilla, it still is at 6. Pistachio is now at 6.5. Vegan matcha is still our winner. So we would then eliminate the ice cream with the lowest number of votes. That again is vanilla. And at this point, we only have 2 ice creams left. So even though pistachio didn't hit the threshold of 7, there's no more ice creams left in the race. So they have the broadest support of the ice creams that we're running. So vegan matcha and pistachio are declared winners of Arlington's favorite ice cream in this scenario.
Gretchen, what happens at some point if the lowest ranked candidates are tied?
Yep. So that is a really excellent question. So does anybody know what happens in Virginia when an election ends in a tie?
I'd like to say we shoot ourselves.
No, we don't.
Pick a name out of the hat.
Runoff.
Yes,
Runoff?
that is exactly it. So the candidate the winner is determined by lot. So that is the same rule that would apply in the event of a tie in a ranked choice voting election. Is if 2 candidates are tied, the tabulation would stop and the electoral board would decide which candidate would determine by lot. So pull a name out of a hat to determine which candidate would be eliminated.
Okay,
Once again, when you're looking at 30,000 ballots cast, the likelihood of a tie is much lower than if we were looking at a scenario of 10 votes. So, yeah.
so I'm gonna just read this question because I noticed this too in your phrasing, Gretchen,
Yep.
about this whole process. You were able to declare vegan matcha the winner.
Yes.
And really, that was a winner. We were running an election to select two winners, no?
Yes. Yes.
So just, I think the person has become a little confused because you did say that vegan matcha was the winner and we were done.
Yes. No,
So-
vegan matcha is a winner. That is correct. I apologize for not using the correct article there.
And the next question is, are we still in the primary?
We're still in so this is all the primary. And once again, when I say winner, I want to make it clear they have won the nomination for the Democratic Party. They have not won the election. That we will vote again in November to determine the next county board members. So, yeah.
And there's a question, is all of this racking and stacking being done by computer?
Yes.
You talked about if there's a tie, then you guys would,
Yes.
decide
Yeah.
randomly,
Yes.
but otherwise it's all automated.
Yes, so we in Virginia will be using a tabulation software that has been approved by the Department of Elections. And it has gone through federal certification. So what happens on election day, all of the votes are stored on that scanner in this flash drive, a removable media. We then will aggregate all of those ballots on a computer and then run through tabulation. And I think that's that leads into this next slide about when results will be known on election day, because we cannot determine the number of votes a candidate needs to win until all of the ballots have been cast. It may take up to 7 days to confirm the winners and run through this tabulation, run through the rounds. And a part of that is because in Virginia, we will accept mail ballots that are postmarked by election day up until the Friday after the election. In addition to that, we still have provisional ballots. These were ballots that were cast on election day where we couldn't determine the eligibility of that voter. The electoral board only begins adjudicating these ballots on the Wednesday after the election. So because we don't know how many ballots will have ultimately been cast until Friday at the very earliest, we cannot run through those subsequent rounds of tabulation until that point. And once again, all of that would be done computerized, and it is done as part of the canvas, which is a public process open to the public. So. Okay, I think, so we do have a newsletter up where you can go subscribe to our email newsletter. This is the same, if you subscribe to any Arlington County newsletters, we use the same service. So if you want to receive updates on voting and elections information, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter. And then at this point, I will take questions. And I will just leave our contact information up here while I take questions. So if anybody wants to write down our number to call us, or our email, or our website. So, yeah.
So first question is, will there be provisional results?
Mm-hmm. So election night, we will be able to release the first round results. So we'll know how everybody ranked their first choice election night. Those will be released at the exact same time as all the other races. So
next question, will this method be used for the 2024 presidential election?
So it has not been authorized for use in any other election in Virginia. There was a bill to allow parties to use this to nominate their candidate in the presidential primaries next year. But that bill was pulled by the patron in this last General Assembly session. So at this point, it can only be used in county board or city council races, and only Arlington County has authorized it, and they've only authorized it for use in this specific election.
Somebody wants to know, do you need volunteers to help with anything for the June primary?
So we always take election officers, and election officers, the people working at the polls, those are just members from the community. It is a long day. It is about a 15-hour day. And I realize that might be a little bit long for some of Neighborhood Villages members. So you can apply to be an election officer, once again, if you go to our website. And then if you just want short-term volunteer opportunities, I believe there's an organization called Upvote Virginia, which might be doing exit polling at the polling locations on election day to gauge how voters feel about ranked choice voting. So there might be a volunteer opportunity with them. So
I have a question. I'm not sure I understand it. How are the rankings established? And would they vary depending on the position?
This is Marie. Can I ask the question directly?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm following this along. It's very convoluted. And I think Mike responded to it, but I'm not familiar with the caucus process. So this is the county board, correct? And this is the only position, let's say that's what I'm talking by position. Okay.
Yes.
And behind the scenes, there's some kind of a threshold, a ranking, a percentage. How's that determined?
So once again, it's that formula that we use for this election. It's based on how many open seats there are. And so that's where this election, that threshold is 34%.
Okay.
And it's just a formula that's used that was set forward in the administrative code.
And as the ranked choice ranking rolls out, right, and you get different positions like the presidential, et cetera, they won't necessarily be 34%. That's going to vary based on an algorithm or?
No, it varies based on how many open seats there are. And if we think about it's basic math.
It's math-based,
Yeah, so if we're only electing one seat, it's a way to get a majority. So we need to get 50% of the votes in order to be declared the winner of this process. So if we look at states like Georgia, or Georgia's the most common, where they have runoff elections, so they need a candidate to reach 50% before they can be elected. This is a way to do that without having to run a runoff election. So we can capture a voter's second choice without having to run a whole other election. So if we're looking at president where we're only electing one person, it would be just a 50%, a simple majority threshold. So, or sorry, a majority threshold.
Yeah.
Is there a plan to update the voting machines to be able to handle large numbers of candidates?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We did put into the capital improvement plan to replace our voting system in 2025. And there's a couple of reasons for that timeline, but we are looking at replacing our voting system, and we do have funding allocated for it in 2025.
Will there be any human audit of the tabulation just to make sure the algorithm is really doing what you think it's doing?
So that's a really excellent question, and that is not something I can answer right now, because we are seeking authorization to audit this election, run an audit on this election. But if the election is close enough where we're looking at a recount, then the recount becomes the audit. So we of course we don't necessarily want to see a recount, but if we don't have a recount, then we will be looking to audit this process to make sure that everything was done according to what we anticipate, what we told it should be doing. So yeah.
Do mail-in ballots require a witness signature?
Yes, so mail ballots do still require a witness signature for this election. That is a bill that did change. So starting in the fall, there will no longer be a witness requirement, but you will have to list, I believe it's the last 4 of your social and your date of birth. So there needs to be some kind of identity requirement to make sure that it is you, the voter, casting this ballot.
But Gretchen, just this is for me. I thought I didn't need a witness on this mail-in ballot this time.
No, you need a witness. So that new law does not go into effect until July 1st. So
Okay,
while the law did change, yeah, you need a witness.
Not yet.
Yeah.
This is Jean Anderson, and I just want to make a comment. It's interesting that you first you have to see the number of people who actually went to vote, and then the formula starts to kick in.
Yeah.
And so what it says to me is how very, very important it is now, just trying out ranked voting, that people vote, because that's when you look at how many people actually voted before you start doing the ranking. And I think that is something very stimulating to me to think about that. So I think that is just, at least for this one particular area that we're going to try it in, I think that's where your vote counts. And, you know, that's the message that I'm getting.
Yeah.
Well, it's always important to vote, Gretchen, isn't that right?
It's but I do keep in mind that since this is a Democratic primary, there are voters in this community who will not be interested in voting in this election. And I think it's always important to, I think voting in every election is important, but it is a Democratic primary. So
Right.
Gretchen, can you quickly run down where the drop boxes are in the county right now?
yeah, absolutely. So we do have 9 drop boxes in the county, and they are positioned such that nobody is more than 2 miles from a drop box. So I'm going to start in the south of Arlington and go up. So we have one at the Aurora Hills Library, one at Shirlington Library, one at Arlington Mill Community Center, one at Walter Reed Community Center, one at Westover Library, one at Central Library, courthouse right outside of our office, and then one up at Madison. In addition to that, every polling location on election day and every early voting location while they're open is also a drop location for a mail ballot. And so you can go into any polling location in Arlington. It doesn't have to be yours if you want to just drop off your mail ballot. If you want to trade in your mail ballot to vote in person, that you have to go to your neighborhood polling location that you've been assigned to. So.
Do you bring in your blank? Can I have marked my mail-in ballot and decide on election day that I should instead, you know, go in person and give them a marked ballot that I don't want to use?
Yeah, no, so that is always an option. If you request your mail ballot and you just would feel more comfortable voting in person, that is always an option. So you can come vote early in person and you'll sign what we call a gold form. Or no, sorry, if you bring your ballot with you, you'll just trade that in and be given a new ballot. If you don't have your ballot with you, you need to sign a gold form, basically so we can reissue you a second ballot. And if you go to vote on election day, if you have your ballot, once again, you just trade that in for another ballot. If you do not have your ballot, you will cast a provisional ballot since we don't know where that ballot is. And so once the electoral board starts adjudicating those provisional ballots, if we don't have your mail ballot, we will count that provisional ballot. So.
Well, okay. Again, you know, a lot of us are not, or maybe I should say math challenged, but then we have Gary. So any A&V person who would like to follow up on this topic, Gary, I'm going to volunteer you. He is
I
able.
would actually like to get a copy of your slides, Gretchen.
Absolutely.
The partial, you know, when you've declared one winner, what you do with those ballots is new to me, and I'm not sure I understand what's going on there yet. So
yeah, no, and I would say, because a lot of people do the second you start talking about fractions, they start worrying about the math. But I want to go back to when I put up the 6 ice cream. When you saw that, could you rank your ice creams? And that's the voter experience. So do you have a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice? You can't have 2 first choices. You need to have a first and a second, but that is the process. So. But I'll absolutely share these slides with you. So,
and maybe we should stop recording at this point and sort of wrap up here. It's 11 o'clock, and I know your time is very precious, Gretchen. But again, I can't say how much we appreciate the good work you do as a civil servant working for the taxpayer in Arlington and the voters in Arlington. Yeah, Gary, why don't we stop?